I'm gonna put this up here. These are pictures of my daughter, Sarah, who I will tell you about in a little bit. I'll just sit that down. See if I can get it to sit up here. There. Maybe not. Okay. Okay, here I go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to let me share my testimony. I have to be honest with you, I'm scared, a little scared. I have been experiencing a panic attack off and on since this afternoon, but God is great, and you guys have been like so welcoming, so that it's been like, but it's been my prayer much of this afternoon and into this evening that God is just gonna help me to calm down, and that, you know, I can do this. So I am, you know, I repeated to myself as I got out of the car, I can do all things through him who gives me strength, including getting through this panic attack. So I'm gonna kind of tell you about my life. I grew up with a very rich Christian heritage. You know, my parents were Christians, my grandparents were Christians, my mom's parents, my dad's parents, my dad's dad was around, but I really didn't have a real strong relationship with him. He spent 6 months of the year in Texas and 6 months in Hubbard, and we'd see him once. My dad's mom passed away a year before I was born, so I never knew her. But so when I say my grandparents, I'm referring to my maternal grandparents. My maternal grandmother's mom, my great-grandmother, who we great-grandkids lovingly refer to as old grandma, was a treasure trove of lessons. She was, you know, holidays, she would invite us to her house, and, you know, there would be just amazing smells and great food and fellowship. And she taught me about serving others. She served Meals on Wheels each week. And she was great at turning the other cheek when family members would, you know, she was really great about turning the other cheek. And I am so glad that I had her in my life for 11 and a half years. I grew up in a Christian home, as I said. I have an older sister and a younger brother. And my mom and dad were very involved and are still involved in my Christian development. But my parents were involved with my Christian faith development through being willing to teach Sunday school, coach Bible quiz team for the grades 3 through 6, which helped not only my brother and I hide God's word in our hearts, but it helped other kids at the church our ages. They were willing to lead caravan, you know, be on church boards, you know, whatever the need arose to make sure that not only were our spiritual development happening, but the spiritual development for the other kids and other adults at our churches. Growing up in a Christian home, I think definitely, and becoming a Christian at a young age, I have been a Christian since I was 3 years old. I feel like it protected me from some things that maybe a person who wasn't a Christian, you know. The other thing, having my parents so involved in my life, you know, when, you know, events, things that we were involved in, my parents always were a part of. You know, they went to my sister's band, you know, when my sister was in marching band, or her concerts, you know, choral concerts. My brother with his endless amount of ball games. My brother played baseball. My brother played soccer. My brother played basketball. My parents traveled to Salina, Ohio when my brother was a senior in college for the NCCAA College World Series. his senior year at Geneva. I was already out of college, but so my parents have been involved. My parents went to every play I was in from the time I was 5 years old until last year before. They've been involved in stuff that I've been involved in, and supportive. I also was blessed to attend the same church as my maternal grandparents until I was 7 years old. I have wonderful memories of singing hymns like Holy, 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 leaning on the everlasting arms and blessed assurance with my grandparents. I remember standing on the pew when I was like 3 or 4 with my grandpa holding me on one arm, I think, and my cousin Kelly, who's 2 years older than me, on the other. Like, we were that was us. My maternal grandmother was a prayer warrior. She attended a prayer group, and her passion and belief in prayer has been instilled in me. I credit her with helping me to become a prayer warrior myself. Amen. I remember as a young child that learning to pray was important. I remember many times asking my grandma to ask the women in her prayer group to pray for a request I had. And I never remember her telling me that my concern was silly or that it was a waste of Jesus' time. I was valued. And I learned that no matter what concern I had, I could take it to Jesus. And I learned how to pray for other people. I remember praying for lots and lots of people at bedtime. And some of them I could still tell you their names 30 years later. But I don't remember, I knew I could pray for people. And I remember one of my grandma's friends asked for prayer because she had lost her joy. And I remember being like 3 or 4 and not understanding what that meant. Why? I know now what that means. But, my inability to fathom what losing your joy meant didn't stop me from praying for her. And I was blessed to be able to ask her later. And she said she was still working on it, but that it was coming back little by little. And I remember being able to thank God for answered prayers. Amen. Praying that God would get you through the next day or, the next spelling test or the next math test. I was never really good at math. So praying that God would get me through the timed math test and, that I would be okay. So God answers prayer. As I had a very varied church background. So to me, as long as the church, believes that Jesus is the only way, it's all that matters to me. But we attended a Presbyterian church, and then an Assembly of God, an EC church, and a Nazarene church. When my husband and I got married in December of 2007, and I joined his church, it brought me back to the Presbyterian church. As I said, my diverse church background has been an asset to me because I don't see any denomination as being better or more right than any other. Amen. As long as they're preaching that Jesus is the only source of salvation. That's right. I feel like my Christian walk has been enhanced by those varied events. As I was kind of prepping for this, I realized that I could name every one of my Sunday school teachers from when I was a kid. Every youth leader that I had, I could tell you their names. And I thought fondly of the director of the kids group at the EC church who has gone on to be with Jesus and her involvement in getting me interested in drama. The very first time I acted, I was 5 years old. I had pigtails and a pair of overalls rolled up to my knees, and it was down by the creek bank, and my line, I think, was something like, about the guy and, Mr. Jenkins, I remember Mr. Jenkins, and I was 5 years old, I've been involved with, my Christian walk has been enhanced by Sunday school teachers, youth leaders, pastors, members of churches that I have attended, as well as teachers at school who were believers. One Christian teacher I particularly remember was my 3rd grade teacher. She was salt and light to my wounded heart. You see, I had not had real great school experiences the 2 years prior. When I was in 1st grade, I had a teacher accidentally stick a Kleenex in my mouth. I already had a phobia of Kleenexes, so I assure you that did nothing to help me. I weathered that. My parents fought and got me put into a different class, which was a godsend. And in 2nd grade, I had the teacher my sister had had 5 years before that, which was fine, would have been great. Except my sister and I are 2 very different people. And the teacher expected me to be like my sister. I'm not. Okay, I love my sister dearly, but my sister and I have very different strengths that have served us well in our lives. At that point, we didn't know that I had a learning disability. So because I'm 7 years old, me learning that I had a learning disability is 15 years down the road when I'm 22 years old. So I'm 7. I don't know that I have a learning disability. All I know is I can't concentrate to save my life. Yeah. So I get it. I've been a Christian most of my life, but I've also struggled with depression and anxiety for almost as long as I've been a Christian. I remember the first time I experienced being depressed, I was 9 years old. Anxiety probably in 1st grade with the teacher. So I've struggled with that. I've cried out to God many times for his help. Like Paul with, take the thorn from me. And God saying, my grace is sufficient for you. So I've had to lean on God. Right now, I'm leaning on God. I am broken, but God holds me together with his love. I keep a prayer journal, and in an entry on June 7th, 2015, I talk about how I had spent much of the year feeling anxious. And I talked about reading Philippians 4:6. And I'd had a revelation about the 2 words, with thanksgiving. So if we present our requests and anxieties and our thanks, God's peace envelops us. In 2016, I had spoken at Lebanon Church about Sarah's butterflies. And the pastor had given an assignment to list what we knew that helped us rest in God. So here's my list. Number 1, you determined that April 26th, 1979 would be my birthday. Of the 365 years, that was the one. 2, November 15th, 2009 was not my death date. That was the day Sarah died. Nor was May 10th, 1979. That was the day I quit breathing and God put the breath of life back in me. And number 3, well, actually I have 4. Number 3, I don't know what the end date is, and it's not up to me to decide. Amen. And day 4, each day has its blessings. Amen. So I'm a college graduate. I graduated from Geneva College in the class of 2001. I was an education major. During my time in college, I was an elementary and special ed major for a while, and then in trying to get done, so I didn't have any more college debt than I already had, I dropped my special ed major to get done on time. So I'm heading into the fall of 2000. I am determined that I'm going to be the best in student teaching, and had all these things. So I'm gonna be best in student teaching, and I'm gonna get a great job, and I'm gonna move to Maryland or Virginia. The best way to make God laugh is tell him what your plans are. He laughed hysterically that year. So he showed me that his plans and mine, they don't always meet. So I was forced to face the fact that I might not become a teacher. Something that I had worked for a very long time and wanted a lot. Wasn't going to happen. So, but then I also learned something really, really important. I learned that even if my life was in shambles and I had nothing, but I had God, I was okay. I had everything. I had more than enough. The summer before my senior year of college, I had attended family camp, a church service down at District Center in Butler. And I just felt that I needed a devotional. So I went to the book table and I asked the pastor working if he could recommend a devotional for me. And he did. And he recommended this, devotional called A Holy Encounter, Meeting God in His Word. So the book takes you through the lives and lessons of heroes of faith like Moses, David, Daniel, Paul, and Abraham. The heroes of faith's lives encouraged and challenged me when I was discouraged and struggling. During the week of Moses, I discovered the verse in Exodus 33:14. My presence will go with you and I will give you rest. Or as it says in the Message Bible, my presence will go with you and I will see you through the journey. So I struggled with anxiety attacks that would awaken me and have me feeling like I was glued to my bed. And it didn't happen just once. It happened a lot of times. And, in trying to weather this and holding on to that verse, I wrote a poem based on the verse. And it says, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. So close your eyes and rest your weary head. I know the pain you're going through and the questions that remain. I will sing you a heavenly lullaby. Amen. The fall of 2000, I was in a practicum placement in an elementary school classroom, and I was struggling. Nothing made sense. Here I am, a semester before my student teaching, when everything's supposed to make sense, and it doesn't make I might as well have been trying to do geometry for all the more it made sense to me. But I had a professor who had me for another class where I was tutoring and succeeding. And, it's Thanksgiving break. I'm struggling to make a lesson happen. And we get back, we had gone to Kansas to visit my sister and we came back and my mom calls to talk to my professor, except she can't talk to the professor I wanted her to talk to because she wasn't supposed to talk to that professor. She was supposed to talk to my reading professor who had me for tutoring. And so she talks to my mom and the conversation results in me being tested and ultimately identified in February of 2001, my very final semester of college, that I have a learning disability. Well, la-di-da, I could have told you that when I was in second grade. I knew something was the matter with me. But all of a sudden it made sense. And the other thing was, I wasn't stupid, I wasn't dumb. I have a learning disability. I learn differently, and I had struggled my whole life. The time tests that I panicked watching the clock, the fact that 24-piece puzzles are about as big as I can go. In lieu of student teaching, I did internships. And one internship, I was at a public housing project within walking distance of the college because I didn't have my license yet. So I'm tutoring a student, an elementary student, in spelling and math. And it was there that I felt God say, hey, you're making a difference. And I wanted to stay so bad, but there wasn't a job. So I had to go home. I had to come back home, you know. I mean, there wasn't any Maryland or Virginia, but I wanted Beaver Falls. And God said, no, go to Mercer County, go back home, you know. So I did. And the working with this student in Beaver Falls and helping her would be something that would help me a decade later when my daughter passed away. So 5 years after I graduate from college, my mother made me get up on April Fool's Day 2006 to go to a meeting for the young Republicans. Thanks, Mom. I mean that now. I wasn't happy on that morning. I wanted to sleep in. However, God was at work on this because April Fool's Day 2006 would be the day that I met my husband, Jim, at Republican headquarters in Mercer. So 2 months after we meet and after we've written bylaws, we took a little trip to Harrisburg to charter our group. And a couple years before we had met, my best friend from college had sent me a copy of the book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. See, she sent me that book because, well, for lack of a better word, my dating life before I dated my husband was a train wreck. I dated my share of toads. And after you date some toads, you know, and you meet one that's worth it, you do. So I'd read the book and I had taken copious notes. And not only did I take notes, but when I met Jim, I applied what I learned. You know, no sense in taking notes if you're not gonna use it, right? So I applied my learning. And so September 12th, 2006, a couple of days after Jim's birthday party, I wrote in my journal a prayer for my future spouse, as well as for the future spouses of Jim and our friend Guy. See, Guy and Jim were both my friends, and I had talked to them in June when we were in Harrisburg for the chartering. And I told them that I wanted this summer to get to know both of them, and that in the fall, I might want to date one of them. You know, so it's September, and that weekend of Jim's birthday, I started to really like him, you know, not a bad thing. You know, my heart started listening to his heart. And I began to see him as more than a friend. And I remember telling Guy that if he was going to make his move, he needed to do it because I thought Jim was going to make his. Well, Jim did the following Saturday on the way to our meeting. He hands me a sweatshirt because I'm always cold. Always. It can be 90 degrees and something on me will be cold, whether it's my arms or my feet. So our relationship developed quickly because God wanted it to develop. We dated for 3.5 months before we became engaged on New Year's Day of 2007. And we were married on December 8th, 2007, 11 months after we got engaged. Jim is an answer to my prayers. He is funny, sensitive, strong, and perseverant. He's a man of faith who lives it. He doesn't let his disability limit him. And he doesn't let my disability limit me either. So November 15th, you know, we were married 23 months at this point. So it's November 15th, 2009. And I called him and said, honey, Sarah's in cardiac arrest. And he and my mother-in-law made their way to the hospital. And no amount of prayer would put the breath of life back in Sarah. And believe me, I prayed and I called people who were prayer warriors, figuring if God wasn't going to listen to my prayer, he'd listen to the prayers of some other people. Sarah's death and the complications that followed caused me to sink into a chasm of depression that resulted in suicidal ideations. I spent 6 weeks hiding thinking I was hiding what I was feeling from my husband, but he already knew. It would be 6 months before I felt safe enough to be home alone. On January 8th, 2010, I wrote this prayer. Thank you for today. Thank you for blessings. Thank you that we can ask and you care. Thank you for caring about me and allowing me to question why Sarah died. Lord, you know me completely. You knit me together in my mother's womb and placed a number of days. You knit Sarah Elizabeth together in my womb, and you gave her a small number of days. But God, you knew the events of November 15th. You knew Sarah was going home. And while I wish you had allowed her to live, I thank you for 3 days. I thank you for holding her hand and taking her home to be with you. In the wake of Sarah's death, Jim and I and our families came together to figure out how to honor our baby. It started with an unfinished Christmas present for an uncelebrated Christmas. At first, we called the ministry Sarah's Toy Box because my dad, Sarah's papa, was building her a toy chest. He had built 2 toy chests for my 2 nephews, and he was building one for her. We didn't know whether he would finish it. He decided in the spring of 2010 to finish it. In the summer of 2010, we were at my mother-in-law's annual fundraiser. And it was there that Jim and I, both sets of parents, were privileged to talk to Pastor Bruce Rachael, the pastor of Love Christian Center, and a friend of ours. He spoke of the children who his church ministered to. Those stories found a tender place in my mom's heart, and she asked me if I wanted to do Sarah's Toy Box for Bruce's kids, as she called them. I was immediately on board. Amen. I sat down in the following weeks to draft a letter beginning a ministry to honor my daughter's memory and to benefit children in public housing projects similar to the one I had volunteered at in 2001. The ministry of Sarah's Toy Box is an example of the prayer of Jabez, found in 1 Chronicles 4, 9 and 10. Jabez was more distinguished than any of his brothers. His mother named him Jabez because she had such a hard time at his birth. Jabez means distress. He was the one who prayed to the God of Israel, "Oh, that you would wonderfully bless me and help me in my work. Please be with me in all that I do and keep me from all evil and disaster." And God granted his request. In the summer of 2010, when I wrote the letter to begin the ministry, God gave me this verse to hold on to. And each year, God has graciously expanded our territory and wonderfully blessed us. In 2011, when we began handing out snack bags that we call blessing bags, we have distributed over 6,000 blessing bags. They're clear gallon-sized bags full to the brim of snacks.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
Amen. We began Sarah's Butterflies Foundation in 2013, and the name of the ministry changed to avoid the confusion. Sarah's Butterflies gives me and my family a way to honor Sarah each year. Our mission statement is, Sarah's Butterflies is a non-profit organization that is motivated by God's love to share hope with those who are discouraged. We respect their dignity and seek to aid children in need through our love for Sarah Elizabeth by making a difference in the world for Jesus. Amen. Each year, I seek to spread hope to anyone who is discouraged. I know what it's like to be a discouraged, grieving mom. I have worn that label for 11 years, 5 months, and 1 day. In room 210 at Grove City Medical Center, November 15th, 2009, my family converged and we began attempting to figure out just how to honor Sarah. First, we started a scholarship in her memory with the Early Education Center at Grove City College. And then we honored her memory with a March of Dimes team to help other families, and to raise awareness of infant loss. And finally, we began the foundation. As I mentioned before, God has expanded our territory each year. In October 2012, 2 months before December 26th delivery date, I prayed this for our delivery day. Lord, I want to thank you now for all the stuff you will provide. Not that he had provided. He was gonna. Amen. Lord, we need enough to do Ravine, Market, Hamilton, and any other places you want to give hope. Blessed hope from you. I believe that was the year that we began going to Centennial Place. Back in 2005, I had worked for 3 months in Centennial Place babysitting children while their mothers worked to get their GEDs. Like Moreto Dwellings, Centennial Place holds a special place for me. On January 2nd, 2017, I wrote this prayer. Thank you for this blessed day. Lord, you have been gracious to Sarah's Butterflies. You only, dear Father, could expand the sphere of influence the way you have. To take something so small and make it grow so large just astounds me. Lord, the task is overwhelming, but I know that you are using me to do something amazing. Lord, I bring these youngsters and teens to your holy, nail-scarred hands, and I pray that you would equip them to serve you. As we did Sarah's Butterflies in 2017, God gave us a rainbow over Love Christian Center that morning. And that morning, he also gave us a butterfly-shaped patch of ice on the windshield of the U-Haul. I felt the need to pray as I was standing in the back with our supplies at Malibu. So I'm standing in the back of the U-Haul at Malibu going, you know, God, I really could be praying right now, couldn't I? And I felt a touch of the Holy Spirit, and it became holy ground. I stood there looking at Malibu Heights sign going, okay, God, this is holy ground. You're here. And according to Pastor Bruce Rachael, he knew God's Spirit had filled me when he came back to the van. I had the privilege that day of spending time with one of our teen volunteers named Alize. It's the only time I met her was that day. She rode in the truck with me for a couple of stops. But God still knows Alize, and God knows Alize's story, and God isn't done with Alize, and I have faith in that. Sarah's Butterflies is my mission field. The streets of each community where we distribute blessing bags is a holy encounter, and each recipient is created in God's image and is a masterpiece. For us to deliver the blessings, we have to leave the church and go down the hill. We got to leave the mountaintop to go to the blessings. In 2019, we delivered bags in Sharon, Farrell, Sharpsville, West Middlesex, Transfer, Greenville, Sandy Lake, Stoneboro, Grove City, Mercer, Youngstown, and New York City. Now you're probably going, how in the world did you get to New York City? Okay, so there's a lady in Sharon who cuts hair, Ann Baker. And Ann Baker goes to New York City. And Ann's boyfriend is a friend of ours. So, which I didn't know when I called Ann that day, was that she knew our friend Dale. And she goes, oh, by the way, you know Dale? I'm like, yeah, I know Dale. Well, Dale's my boyfriend. And I'm like, well, small world. So Ann goes to New York City. And Ann takes, in 2019, Ann took 260 of our blessing bags to the homeless in New York City. While COVID may have kept us from delivering in 2020, it didn't keep us from blessing. Amen. Because let me tell you, we found Satan didn't want us to make a difference. So we decided we can't go. It's not safe for us to go. However, we have some money. We're going to donate it to the community food warehouse, and they can take it and go. So that's what we did. I'm sure that there are many things that I have left out. And so after I'm done, if you would like to get my contact information, I do have business cards. But I want to end this with a quote from Patrick Henry. And I've had this on many of my prayer journals. And it says, I wish I could leave you with my most cherished possession, my faith in Jesus Christ. Amen. For with him, you have everything. And without him, you have nothing at all. Right. Thank you for listening to me this evening. And may you be blessed.